Hello, and welcome to another episode of Creating Cultures that Outperform. As you are well aware, we've moved on to AI completely, and we're covering enterprise-wide AI transformation. This week, we're going to be talking about governance. We have a great show for you, and I'm here with my two incredible co-hosts, Terry Mays, certified culture engineer, and George Pace from Keep Pace Technology, who has been a longtime fan and speaker on the subject of AI. I'm Frank Wander. I'm the founder of People Productive and Boardroom Edge. And today we're covering AI governance. We're going to be doing a series on AI governance. And I think you find this super interesting. Companies don't get governance right, at least below the board level and executive level. And so we're going to spend a lot of time talking about that and show you how important this is in terms of your efforts to do enterprise-wide AI. All right, so without further ado, we always start with what we learned this week, and I think this is very revealing. We're going to go through this note that came out from JP Morgan to all of its vendors. We're going to talk about what it means. It is a governance failure. So we'd like to talk about this as the backdrop to what we're going to cover in the rest of the show. So why don't we just get right into it? This we share every week as our model or framework that we use that all enterprise-wide AI courses are going to fall under. We reserve the right to change it, certainly, but we think this is 90% right. And we'll be updating this over time as we get to the final course. So, Tara?
Yes. So this is very interesting that JP Morgan Chase has just released this open letter to their third-party suppliers and sounded the AI alarm, security alarm. So as we know, JP Morgan Chase is really stepping out in an area where companies don't typically do this kind of thing. They don't typically say, hey, there's a problem here. This is a really good indictment on JP Morgan Chase, where they're saying, hey, we are seeing some things, and other companies are really not paying attention to this. Everybody kind of rushed to deploy all of these AI solutions, and we created all of these transformation offices, and we deputized all of these AI leaders, and we created all these AI training systems. And, we kind of called it there that we knew we needed to innovate or there was going to be a problem with extinction, but we didn't really secure these AI solutions that we're rolling out. We're kind of like just running. We're trying to run and walk at the same time. And every time you try to do that, there's bound to be some missteps. And so JP Morgan Chase is really calling to the forefront some of these issues with security. And what their assessments have revealed is that 78% of enterprise AI deployments lack proper security protocols. So you're really opening up your company to some pretty severe exposure, and 78% of AI deployments are really insecure. That's a staggering number. Most companies can't explain how their AI makes decisions. They don't really know. They don't really understand what they've implemented and how it can benefit others and what decisions are being made out of these different models. They're just checking the box and saying, yes, we've deployed AI, but they have really no real deep understanding of what they've deployed. And then security vulnerabilities have increased 3 times since mass AI adoption. So everybody was quick to jump on ChatGPT and Microsoft Copilot and all the other solutions that are out there, you name it. Everybody was quick to jump on it, but I don't think there was enough consideration with the impact to just overall governance and the governance models that would be needed to support this widespread enterprise-wide use of AI.
And one thing to take away from this is this falls into the we don't know what we don't know category. So as these new tools are being added to the quote unquote supply chain, and if you think about these workflows that really will be a combination of internal versus external, it now has created this quote unquote supply chain. And the question becomes, how do you govern it? How do you govern it? What are the rules of engagement? How do you participate? Because you're across all these vendors. So as you start reaching out beyond your perimeter, you're going to start tripping upon these challenges.
Yeah, and how do you actually control this from the beginning? If you have good governance in place, then the right questions are getting asked up front. You're doing small deployments. You're figuring out what are these vulnerabilities. You're building expertise. In my experience, our operational risk and cybersecurity governance groups would have been all over this, and would have been out in front of this train before it left the station. I mean, this is what you see happening in companies without good governance. People go off and you have all these renegade projects, programs, and other things going on. And at the end, they go, oh my God, how are we going to pull this all back together? Look at what happened. Oh, nothing's compatible. Oh my God. Classic. But George, you want to comment on this?
Oh, this is these next two slides are like my pet peeve slides. But if you think about it, there is this concept of being first, being a market leader, and then fast follower. And in a sense, it's become challenging in this day and age, because in order to be a fast follower, you got to invest and how do I say this? You're balancing your risk in a sense, and we're balancing risk in an industry that is still in the early innings and evolving. So the question really becomes, how do you best? And to me, this is just we might as well have entitled this page the technical debt page. How do you really make progress in a way that you're achieving some successes or some education, but at the same point in time, you've put a wrapper around your technical debt? And the problem is that done improperly, governance can be seen as a hindrance. The key here is to make these decisions quickly so that you can say, okay, we've at this point in time, based on the risk that we know about, here's the decision that we're making, and you make sure that that's communicated. Now, if that decision needs to change over time, it's okay, because you've gotten everybody to do the same thing. What's happening in a lot of these deployments are there are a series of one-offs. This individual knows this, this individual knows this, this individual tried this, and you try and bring that together in the hopes, or in the absence of a strategy, that it's all going to work. So to me, this whole concept, governance in of itself isn't new. Now the problem becomes you have something that will be using outside resources, and in the world of no standards, you got to put something together to protect your own interests.
Yeah, it's interesting. They should be actually experimenting with this stuff, because we're still in the experimental phase of most of these companies. There are deployments going on, but in the experimental phase, you're moving up that learning curve. And this is the time to take your existing governance mechanisms, if you have them in place. And from my experience moving across Fortune 250 companies as CIO, you get there and you find out they really don't have a good governance framework or model in place. You got to really build it. And so they don't have these structures. People don't know how to address these governance mechanisms. If it's well run, it's like a play that's been rehearsed many times. People get how it works, what their role is, who the actors are on stage with them, and how to go out and address the whole thing. So these are big risks when you get to something like AI. I got to tell you, and this is going to show up in many ways in many different companies. And part of the technical debt isn't just all the stuff they bought over all the years that really didn't fit together into a nice puzzle, or that they never addressed dealing with. It's also the fact they never put governance in and got it working, which is unbelievable.
And the one comment I would make is, if you look at that first bullet that talks about implement AI governance frameworks, this is not saying stop everything and wait till you have the framework in place. This is going to be an iterative process. So just to take two off the top of my head, if you don't have a strategy around your user engagement strategy or user experience, that's going to be a problem. As you hit user experience, you get a few of your key people in a room, you hammer out what the decision is. You now have the start of a framework for a user experience. The second one comes down to regulation. There's regulation at the state, federal, and international level. Well, you have to decide in what areas or what locales you want to participate in. You then have to say, what is the guidance or the structure that we need to have in place? You put it in place and you move on. So this is, if you want to do governance as an agile process, that's how you make it actionable, but you just don't wait to have the framework.
Yeah, and the reality is that you should have an existing governance framework under which most of this is going to fit. Your security risks related to AI would fit in your cybersecurity governance. It's got to go in that group. They've got to have a holistic view of everything. new operational risks that are coming out because this stuff is being integrated into business processes. That should go into ORM, operational risk management. You should have those operational risk committees in the different groups and organizations. We always had an operational risk group in IT, and there are a lot of operational risks all the time. Loss of data, you name it. You can go on and on. Broken business processes. So this stuff is not, we're going to go build AI governance over here as if nothing exists. If you don't have a complete governance framework running, and you're now doing AI, and that's going to be the first time you do this, you've already got a big problem. You got to look at this holistically. This needs to integrate into your governance framework. It
just
cannot be built on the side, which is, this gives you the belief that you're going to implement this framework like it's something separate. And it's really not. It fits into existing governance. That you'll be completely run amok if you don't take your existing governance frameworks and integrate this into it. But anyway, here's what JP Morgan says. They say they've invested $2 billion in AI security measures while slowing certain deployments. The hard truth, the AI security debt is growing faster than our ability to pay it down. Companies that prioritize security now will emerge as leaders. Those that don't may not survive the coming AI security reckoning. So, look, I'm not going to, their number is their number. That's a real big number to me. And to have this gone that far amok tells you, wow, you've really got to be out in front of this. And we would tell you that from the very beginning. You got to be on top of governance all the way from the beginning. And you got to have control over this and not let the circus go off down the road without, all the ringmasters there, helping control it so none of the lions eat the people. But
just so you know, just within the past 2-3 weeks, I think this came out, just to show you how you need to have resources dedicated tracking this and tracking these trends. On the code generation tools, they have now found a way that quote unquote bad actors can actually take advantage of the LLMs that create code that reference libraries that never existed. And what they did is they created a library that's basically infected. So now when the LLM generates this package that doesn't exist, it goes out, it finds a package that said, hey, this matches, and suddenly you've infected your code base. So there's very subtle things that are in play right now that if you don't have these structures in place, you're going to have problems sooner rather than later.
Yeah, well, you're going to find out the hard way. That's what always happens.
Yeah. I think this also underscores too the heavy weight of duplication of effort through different applications that companies have had over the years, where different groups, each, they may be using similar CRM systems, for example, but they're using different ones. So you've got all this overhead with all these different systems, and none of the systems, of course, talk to each other. Your HR systems don't talk to your CRM systems. You just kind of have all these disparate systems across the organization. So as you start to implement AI in your HR systems, for example, and then you start implementing AI in your sales systems, those systems don't talk to each other. So of course, the AI tools that you're using aren't talking to each other. You're not able to take advantage of enterprise-wide data sharing. So it's just creating this Goliath of a problem in organizations. And I think that's what they're doing with this reference to this $2 billion in AI security measures. It's a Goliath of a problem.
It's a Goliath of a problem. And another problem that's exacerbated this is that boards of directors don't have enough technical expertise. Not only are they not savvy about technology in general, they certainly never used AI, most of them, right? So now you're adding to the mix. And companies, those hard, rough questions about how are you modernizing your infrastructure? If you really understand how this stuff works, these questions would have been asked 2 decades ago. How are you staying current? What are you doing to modernize the stuff? And this is the tech debt. People let it slide. It'd be like, running a restaurant, big restaurant, serving tons of people. And wow, all our stoves and everything from the 1960s. And, we've added some, updated the dials. But, the day it fails, no one goes, how'd that happen?
Right.
It's kind of what it is that you're dealing with.
Yeah.
Okay. So, let's move on to this one.
Oh, this
These are kind of some just basic takeaways as we get into governance over a whole series of episodes here.
Yeah, this is my personal favorite slide, especially bullet number 2. You really get to a true cost of enterprise-wide deployment after you sit down and look at the problem and you have somebody report back as to the emerging components, as it were. But the second bullet is really a systemic problem. Remember, it's great to have a team go off and do a proof of concept or a proof of value or a proof of whatever you call it. That's what it's meant to be. Can we do it? The problem is once you show the POC or the POV, the next phase is, well, when can we get this in production? Well, wait a minute. There's a significant disjoint because getting functionality working is completely different than making sure it's hardened for production. What happens is this is where your technical debt comes in. It's a one-off solution to wrapper it. It's a one-off solution to provide security. It's a one-off solution to do a scan, and it's done in the absence of anything that's enterprise-wide. So quickly, you get into the centralized versus decentralized decisions. You get into cost overruns. You get into technical debt. And this is where the challenges of going back and then retrofitting this become that much more expensive. So you really need to make sure that your proof of concepts or your proof of values, again, whatever you call them, are aligned to the governance team to say, wait a minute, team wants to do this. What's been resolved, what needs to be resolved as a function of this. And this is how you keep your governance efforts in quote unquote agile format.
Yeah. When you look at this, you see so many times, like on bullet 2, there's this rush to get stuff out. Oh my God, we're going to be at a competitive disadvantage. We got to get it done. And, businesses push speed over governance because they think governance is in the way. And certainly stuff gets done. And then you turn around 2 years later and every part of the company is doing similar things with different tools and technologies. And you've got a complete mess because now it doesn't integrate. Now your risks have gone through the roof because you have all these different tools in the place, all of which have to be secured. And no one really thinks about that. I remember as a CIO of a large enterprise, and they had update commissions, and they had never put an architecture in place, centralized to centrally calculate commissions. And there were hundreds of systems, and they had to change it. There was some regulatory changes, $40 million to go in and renovate all this stuff. Today it'd probably be, 100. This was years ago. But, instead of one having a standard for calculating this, everybody went off with no concept or understanding of architecture and why it's so vital and how it actually helps you move faster and control costs. Because over time, the sprawl that results when people go off and do whatever the hell they want costs a fortune. It costs a fortune. And you're not going faster, you're going slower. That's the bottom line. Tara, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it just complicates things in a way where it doesn't have to be complicated, right? So you're introducing all these different tools. And as a result, because you don't have any kind of governance models, right? So you're not using centralized decisions when it makes sense and then decentralizing decision making when it makes sense. You're just kind of running around as, just everybody is doing. It's the wild, wild west of implementation. Everybody's just kind of doing whatever they think is best. People have the best intentions for their organizations, but it's really to the detriment of the overall goal of the company. And as you start implementing these solutions that way, you're just exponentially increasing risk along the way. So you've got to have some real sense of ownership, like who owns what, who's responsible for what, who's accountable for what, so that now you can have these centralized decisions that are made in timely manners. And then in other ways where you need to have people empowered, where they can make their own decisions, you need to have some level of that. You need to have it so that people are able to engage and interact and make decisions on the fly as they need to. You need to have some centralization of the power, and so that people have this sense of authority and they know when to engage this group for governance decisions and when to just kind of go on and do the things that need to get done. There's a nice balance between centralized and decentralized governance that most companies have not figured out how to do that dance. And so you end up with this inconsistent, kind of disjointed lack of nuance in their need to be able to move fast or move slow. There's a whole lot of inefficiency in the governance because they haven't learned how to do that dance yet. And so AI is just going to shine a bright light on the fact that people have not figured out how to do that dance properly.
Yeah, without a doubt. And, when you get down to this stuff like risk, Terry and I have done, I don't know, Terry, over 100 episodes on different aspects of enterprise culture and human behavior. The reality is when you have a company that really does risk management well, you have a risk-aware culture. It's part of the fabric of the place.
Right.
And I spent a lot of time building risk-aware cultures, rolling out different risk management processes, having people collect all the risks they noticed, feeding them into a risk register, massaging it, rolling it up, cleaning it up, reporting it up to an enterprise risk management committee, depending on what we found, the level of severity. And so you've got to have culture that supports all this stuff on top of it.
Yeah,
None of it is just happening on its own on some isolated basis,
Right. Some group that's off to the side that's responsible for organizational risk.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. And so when you look at this, there are things that, certainly we can do to help you. We're always promoting, you can reach out to us through these emails here if you're looking for help. And we've done enterprise risk management, we've done enterprise governance, and AI is just going to fit underneath worn practices, in my opinion. And it doesn't have to be this challenging. You don't have to let it get away from you. Enterprise-wide governance is actually a good thing when you really look at it. I missed this slide, didn't I?
You missed that slide?
Yeah. Okay.
I think this one is a great one because I love this analogy of comparing governance to brakes.
Governance is exactly that. Yeah.
Yeah. You've got to have both. You've got to have the ability to move fast, but you need to reduce the risk. And a good governance model will help you do that so that you're able to kind of put the brakes on when you need to, but then take the brakes off and let people go when it's necessary.
Yeah. And look, this is culture. If people in the company think governance is overhead and they don't like, working through the different governance mechanisms in the place, your culture's broken.
Yeah.
Governance
well, you're probably doing governance wrong, right? So you're using it as the big stick to beat people back into submission. You must follow the process instead of using governance as a guideline, as the guardrails.
As a helpful way of running the place, as a way to professionally manage a very large place. And actually every company, I don't care your size, you need governance mechanisms. You have risks, you have everything. You don't need formal committees for everything, but you better be discussing this stuff.
Just to put this in context, I created an open source office from scratch. And the beauty part is when we were finally done, and again, there were a lot of lessons learned, a developer came up to me or a development team came up to me and said, George, what are our guidelines? What can we use? You give it to them and they go. They're immediately productive because you've done all the organizational preferences, if you want to think of it that way. And we say, here's what the organization wants you to do. Here's the boundaries we've created. Go. And once they knew that they could come to me and get these answers quickly, and we've basically greased the wheels or greased the gears for them, they were incredibly productive. So again, there's a little bit of investment to put that framework in place, but think about that moment when the development teams come up and say, what can we do? How do we do it safely? You've already answered those questions. You've enabled them.
Yeah, and the reality is that when you set up an entire governance framework, every governance mechanism has to run a SWOT every quarter, every 6 months. What are our strengths? What are the weaknesses? What opportunities do you have to improve how we operate? This thing, these work because they're managed well and they're not overhead. And like brakes are important because they allow you to go faster with less risk. That's the bottom line. This stuff is really important. If your governance is broken, fix it. So, next week we're moving on to another episode on governments. We're going to be talking about roles and responsibilities, RACI. We're going to have another governance topic each week. So you'll see how these governance frameworks unfold. And we broadcast every Wednesday, 3:00 Eastern time. I hope you can tune in and join us, start to follow this series, and I hope you're enjoying it. So take care.